The second thing, though, that I think is really, really important is around censorship. And so when you look at, again, every currency in the world today, every single financial service, they're highly susceptible to censorship. And actually, I would argue the United States is in the business of censorship in terms of, how many countries around the world do we sanction and cut them off in either a minimal or a very material way from the global financial system.
So when you talk about censorship, do you mean just the censoring your ability to operate freely in the world?
Well, look at it a little bit differently, which is that the United States has kind of the American superiority. Because we have the bombs, the bullets, the soldiers, and that military might, we basically impose our will around the world.
Yes.
And so there's a very strong argument to be made that there are certain countries around the world that are being sanctioned, that the people of those countries did nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, the governments are bad, right, in terms of the way that you and I would look at democratic rule or communism or whatever it is. But the people are being hurt as well. So there's a whole group of people who would just argue, listen, we shouldn't hurt anyone at the expense of punishing one person or a group of people. There's other people who argue against that. But I do think that if you really kind of zoom out and you say, I'm going to take myself out of the Western worldview, and I'm simply going to look at this as we're all part of the human race, it's censorship. And there might be an argument for censorship, but there also might be an argument against the censorship. And so what Bitcoin does as that specific kind of payment network is it says anyone in the world with an internet connection, I don't care where you were born, what language you speak, what religion you are, your wealth status, your education status, none of it matters. If you have an internet connection, you can plug into this monetary system and you can move value around the world to anyone else without asking for permission. And in the United States, we basically have that ability in the US dollar kind of traditional banking system. I can pretty much send money to almost anyone I want, unless they're a really bad person that's on some list or something. Most people in the world don't have that capability. And so what you're essentially doing is you're democratizing access to a true store of value and a medium of exchange, right? And so what you see in many of these countries is that when their currency starts to fail, the first thing that a government or a group of people in power and influence do is they lock the citizens into the currency with capital controls. Mm-hmm. Why? Because if you let them out, it exasperates the problem. And so now what we're seeing is we basically are giving a tool to billions of people around the world that is a peaceful protest, right? You and I had no say at all when not only the Federal Reserve and elected officials here in the United States, but central banks around the world over the last 12 months decided to create trillions of dollars and inject it into the monetary system, right? They have arguments, and some of them are very good arguments as to why they should do that. They're trying to mitigate short-term pain. Long-term, they'll figure out the other issues, right? They have very kind of elaborate and well-articulated kind of viewpoint as to why they're doing it. But you and I had no say. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to look at, we have a very small group of people in this world, both in our country and in countries around the world, that make these decisions that have very, very far-reaching kind of impact. And on top of that, in many cases, there's actually not that much kind of accountability because usually these are not elected officials who are making some of these decisions. Right. These are appointed. And you can argue that, hey, we elected somebody who appointed them, but at the same time, that accountability isn't quite there. And so I think ultimately when you just back out and you say, what is Bitcoin and why is it important to the world? It is giving access to anyone in the world with an internet connection to a store of value and a monetary network that allows them to peacefully protest and to opt out of a system that pretty much is not working for majority of people in the world.
So it's moving the power from these centralized places, sometimes unelected, to the individuals and to the people. So the dollar does seem to work for Americans and for many people in the world. But you kind of have a vision, you paint a picture of a future where potentially we move to cryptocurrency. So